Today's account comes from Mike, 54, who shared what happened when he received a text from his wife saying she was stuck at work, while sitting 2 tables away, watching her with someone else. This account has been dramatized to protect privacy. AI narration is used throughout. The experience it describes is real.
The candle on the table had been burning for 47 minutes. The reservation was for 2. The second chair was empty. The waiter had come by 3 times, refilled my water twice, and stopped making eye contact after the second refill. The universal signal that he had assessed the situation and decided the kindest thing he could do was stay out of it. I was at Andina, on Northwest Glisson Street in Portland's Pearl District. It is a Peruvian restaurant with good lighting and better ceviche and the kind of ambient noise level that lets 2 people have a real conversation without feeling like they're in a library. I had made the reservation 6 weeks earlier, the same day I booked the hotel room 2 blocks away. 2 years. I had wanted to do this right. My phone buzzed at 7:14 p.m. "I'm so stuck at work, babe. Happy anniversary. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise." I read it twice. I set the phone face down on the table. And then I looked across the restaurant, past the bar, past the cluster of 4 tops near the window, past the couple celebrating something with a bottle of Malbec, and I saw my wife, Brenda, sitting 2 tables away from me in a corner booth I hadn't noticed when I came in, with a man I did not recognize. She was not stuck at work. She was holding his hand across the table. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, but the honest answer is that what I felt was not what you'd expect. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel the specific, sharp variety of humiliation that makes people do things they regret in public places. What I felt was something much quieter and much stranger, the feeling of a man who has just been handed a piece of information that reorganizes everything he thought he knew about his own life, and who needs a moment to let the reorganization complete before he does anything at all. Stay still, I thought. Just stay still. I picked up the phone. I did not text back. I turned it over and placed it face down again, and I looked at the candle, and I breathed. That was when the man sat down across from me. He appeared without warning. Didn't ask, didn't gesture, just lowered himself into the chair opposite me with the particular confidence of someone who has done this before. He was somewhere in his 50s, gray at the temples, wearing a jacket that had seen better days, carrying a cup of coffee from the bar. He had the kind of face that is good at not being noticed. "Don't turn around," he said quietly. His voice was low and completely level. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you do anything." He set the coffee down. "The man she's with is Dennis Hale. He works in her department at Cascadia Partners. They've been meeting for 8 months. A pause. He let that land. "I know this because I've been documenting it. Not for you. I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. I'm here because his wife hired me." I looked at him. "You're a private investigator," I said. "Gary Whitman." He didn't offer his hand. "And you are?" "Mike Sullivan," I told him, "the husband." Gary looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't fully read. "Well," he said, "this got complicated. My name is Mike Sullivan. I'm 54 years old, and until the night of October 12th, the 2nd anniversary of my marriage to Brenda, I would have described my life as functional, if not exactly spectacular. I run a residential contracting business out of Portland, Oregon, Sullivan Building, which I built over 22 years into a 12-person operation. I have a reputation in the Pearl District and Northwest Portland that I was quietly proud of. I am methodical, patient, and not given to dramatic gestures. These qualities, Brenda had told me more than once, were things she admired about me. I was beginning to understand they were also things she had been counting on. Brenda is 52. She is a project director at Cascadia Partners, a commercial real estate firm with offices on Southwest Broadway. She is organized, attractive, and has always been better than me at working a room. The person who knows which conversations to have at which events, who remembers names and uses them correctly, who understands the social architecture of things in ways that I have to think about consciously. I married her because she was sharp and because she made me feel like the world was more manageable when she was in it. I was reconsidering some of my assessments. Gary Whitman sipped his coffee and spoke quietly and methodically, the way someone talks when they have organized a great deal of information and are now selecting what to share and in what order. "Sandra Hale, Dennis's wife, hired me in August," he said. She'd noticed irregularities in their joint account. Small amounts, irregular intervals, never enough to trigger a bank alert, but over 6 months it totaled something north of $22,000. "He was funding the affair," I said. "That's what it looked like to her." Gary set down the cup. "So I started documenting. Dinner receipts, hotel records, car park timestamps, 8 months of meetings, mostly on weekdays, a few weekends when the timing worked. He looked at me steadily. I didn't know the woman had a husband until tonight. I sat with that for a moment. How long has Sandra known? I asked. 3 weeks, Gary said. She's in the process of deciding what to do with what I've found. I nodded slowly. Gary, I said, what exactly have you documented? He looked at me with the expression of a man recalibrating whether to answer. More than enough, he said finally, for Sandra's purposes and potentially for yours. Here is what I want you to understand about the 37 minutes I sat at that table after Gary finished talking. I did not confront Brenda. I did not walk across the restaurant. I did not text her back. What I did was sit with the specific, cold clarity of a man who has been a contractor for 22 years and understands at a cellular level that the quality of the outcome depends entirely on the quality of the preparation. You do not demo a load-bearing wall without knowing what's behind it. You do not make your move until you understand the structure. She texted me from 2 tables away, I thought. She has been planning something, and whatever she's planning, she's had longer to prepare for it than I have. Gary handed me a business card before he left. Call me tomorrow, he said, not because I owe you anything, because I think Sandra is going to want to coordinate, and 2 parallel cases are stronger than 1 isolated case when there's shared documentation. He picked up his coffee and walked back to the bar without looking toward Brenda's corner. I sat at the table for 12 more minutes. I finished my water. I paid the check, the full check for a dinner I had not eaten, in cash because I did not want a credit card transaction at Andina on October 12th on any statement anyone might later review. Then I walked out of the restaurant into the cool October night on Gleason Street, and I drove home to our house in the Irvington neighborhood on Northeast Knott Street, and I went directly to Brenda's home office. I was looking for something. I found it in 8 minutes.
Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these accounts had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and subscribe. You're going to love it here.
It was in the second drawer of her desk, a printed email folded once from a family law firm on Southwest 3rd Avenue. The date at the top was September 28th, 2 weeks ago. The subject line read, Initial Consultation Summary, Sullivan Matter. I unfolded it, I read it, I folded it exactly as I had found it, placed it back in the exact position it had been in, and closed the drawer. I went to the kitchen, I poured a glass of water. I stood at the counter for a long time, looking at the street through the kitchen window, watching a car move slowly down Knott Street in the dark. She's already talked to a lawyer, I thought. She's been planning this for at least 2 weeks, probably longer. I put the glass in the sink. I went to my home office, where I keep the business records. I sat at my desk and opened the joint account portal on my laptop. I looked at the transfer history for the last 6 months. It took me 22 minutes to find the pattern. Small amounts. 800 here, 1,200 there. Irregular enough to look like household expenses if you weren't looking closely. But when I mapped them against the calendar, against the dates I now knew from Gary's account, against the dates of Brenda's overtime claims, against the dates of the transfers Gary had described in Dennis's account, the picture was not ambiguous. Brenda had been moving money for 4 months. Not much at any one time, but cumulatively, I ran the numbers twice, then a third time. The total was somewhere between $18,000 and $20,000. She's been building a runway, I thought, a separate account, money she controls that I don't know about because she's planning to leave. And she wants to be in the strongest possible position when she does. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a while. Then I picked up my phone and searched for family law attorneys in Portland. I was looking for someone specific, not the biggest firm, not the most aggressive name. Someone thorough, someone methodical, someone who worked the way I worked. I found Helen Morse on Southwest 12th Avenue. Her firm's website had a line in the About section that I read 3 times. We believe that preparation is not a luxury, it is the practice. I wrote down the number. I went to bed at 1:17 a.m. Brenda came home at 1:44 a.m. I heard the door. I heard her move through the house. I heard her settle into bed beside me with the careful quiet of someone trying not to wake their partner. I did not move. I did not speak. I lay in the dark and breathed evenly, and I listened to the sound of my own house, and I thought about load-bearing walls. That was the last normal night for a long time. Attorney Helen Morse's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Southwest 12th Avenue, 2 blocks from the federal courthouse. It was a Tuesday morning, October 14th, 9:15 a.m. The office had a view of the West Hills through a northwest-facing window and a quality of functional order that told you something about the person who ran it. Everything in its place, nothing decorative that wasn't also useful, a coffee maker on the credenza that produced genuinely good coffee without making a performance of it. Helen was 58, silver-haired, with the quality of attention that 25 years of family law produces in people who do it well, the ability to listen to the shape of a story before responding to its content. She let me talk for 11 minutes before she asked a single question. When I finished, she said, "You didn't confront her." "No," I said. "Why not?" I thought about this for a moment. "Because she'd already talked to a lawyer," I told her, which meant she was 2 weeks ahead of me. Confronting her would have told her I knew, which would have told her to accelerate whatever she was already planning. I needed time. Helen looked at me steadily. "How much time did you give yourself?" she asked. "One night," I said. "I'm here the morning after." Something shifted almost imperceptibly in her expression. Not quite approval, something more professional than that. "Tell me about the transfers," she said. I walked her through what I had found, the amounts, the dates, the pattern. I had printed the account statements that morning, highlighted the relevant entries, and brought them in a manila folder. "This is circumstantial at this stage," she said, "consistent with the story you're telling, but not yet documentary proof of dissipation of marital assets." She looked at me. "For that, we need a forensic accountant. Someone who can trace the destination accounts and establish a clear chain." "I know someone," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Gary Whitman is a private investigator who has been documenting Dennis Hale's activities for 8 months," I said. "On behalf of Dennis's wife, he has hotel records, dinner receipts, and transfer documentation from Dennis's accounts. Some of those transfers may intersect with what I found in the joint account." Helen was quiet for a moment. "You met this man last night," she said. "At the restaurant?" "Yes." "And he showed you documentation?" "He described it. He said Sandra Hale would want to coordinate." Helen picked up her pen. She wrote something on the legal pad in front of her. "Call Gary Whitman today," she said. "Tell him I want to speak with Sandra Hale's attorney before the end of the week. Parallel cases with shared documentation can be coordinated, but that coordination needs to happen through counsel, not through the clients." She looked up. "Can you do that without telling Brenda anything has changed?" "Yes," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "what do you do for a living?" "Residential contracting," I told her. 22 years. She nodded once, the nod of someone who has just understood something. "Then you know," she said, "that the foundation has to be right before anything else matters." "Yes," I told her, "I do." The second conflict arrived on October 16th, 2 days after I met with Helen. And it arrived in the form of a conversation I was not supposed to hear. I had come home from a site visit in the Alameda neighborhood, a kitchen renovation on Northeast Fremont Street that was 3 weeks into a 5-week timeline, at 4:30 p.m., which was earlier than Brenda expected me. The house on Knott Street has hardwood floors throughout, and the specific creak pattern of the front hallway is something I have known for 15 years. I know which boards announce arrival and which don't. I came in through the side door, which opens into the mudroom, which connects to the kitchen. Brenda was in the living room, on the phone, speaking quietly. I stood in the kitchen doorway. "I know," she was saying. Another pause. "I know. Me too. I'll call you tonight." She hung up. I walked back to the mudroom as quietly as I had come in. I stood there for 90 seconds. Then I went back to the side door, opened it from outside, closed it loudly enough to be heard, and walked into the kitchen with the specific cadence of a man arriving home after a long day. 6 weeks minimum before they file, I thought, setting my keys on the counter. She's giving me a 6-week window without knowing she's giving it to me. "Hey," Brenda called from the living room. "You're home early." "Job wrapped up faster than expected," I told her. "You want to order dinner?" The third conflict, the one that made everything personal in a way the restaurant and the transfers and the phone call had not, happened on October 18th. Helen called me at 2:11 p.m. "I spoke with Sandra Hale's attorney this morning," she said. "His name is Robert, and he's been building a solid case. What Gary Whitman documented for Sandra is extensive." A pause. "Mike, I need to tell you something that came out of that conversation." "Tell me," I said. "The transfers Dennis made, the ones Gary documented from Dennis's accounts, some of them went to a shared account that was opened in July. The account has 2 signatories. Helen's voice was even and precise. Brenda's name is on it. I sat down on the stairs. She's a co-owner of the account, I said. Yes. With Dennis. Yes. I looked at the wall of the Knott Street staircase, the photograph of Brenda and me in Cannon Beach from the summer before we got married, taken by a stranger we'd asked on the promenade, her laughing at something, the Pacific gray and wide behind us. How long? I asked. The account was opened July 10th, Helen said, 3 months before the restaurant. 3 months. She had been planning for 3 months while I was planning a dinner reservation. Mike, Helen said, are you all right? Yes, I told her. Truthfully, the answer was yes. Not because it didn't hurt. It did, in the specific way that revelations about the architecture of a life you thought you understood always hurt. But the hurt was clean. It wasn't confused. I knew exactly what I was looking at. What do you need from me? I asked. Paul Garrett, she said. Our forensic accountant. I want him on this by Monday. Schedule it, I said.
I need you to stay with me for this next part. But before I go there, if you're not subscribed yet, do that right now. Because what comes next is the part nobody saw coming, including me.
Paul Garrett's office was in the Pearl District, on Northwest 13th Avenue, 3 blocks from Andina. I noticed this and found it appropriately symmetrical. He was 55, precise in the way that forensic accountants tend to be precise. Not meticulous about everything, but meticulous about numbers in a way that made everything else feel approximate by comparison. He had reviewed the account statements I brought, the transfer records Helen had subpoenaed through a preliminary filing, and Gary's documentation, shared through Sandra's attorney Robert, by the time we met on October 21st. He spread 4 pages across his desk. $412,000, he said. I looked at the pages. That's the total, I said. That's the total across 3 categories. He pointed to the first page. Transfers from your joint account to the shared account she holds with Dennis Hale, $41,200. Transfers from the shared account to a solo account in Brenda's name that predates your marriage, $68,000, and, he tapped the 3rd page, the market value of the investment account in her name that received a transfer from the joint brokerage in September that was categorized as a reallocation but does not match any reallocation strategy we can document, $302,800. The room was quiet. She moved $300,000 from the joint brokerage, I said. Categorized internally as a rebalancing, Paul said, without your co-signature, which would normally be required for a transfer of that size. The question of how that transfer was authorized is going to be interesting for your attorney. I looked at the pages for a long time. $412,000, I thought. She was thorough. She was methodical. She had been doing this for months, in small amounts and large ones, and she was counting on me not to look. Paul, I said, how fast can you document this for legal purposes? I can have a certified report to Attorney Morse by Friday, he said. Do it, I told him. I stood up and looked out the window at Northwest 13th Avenue. The October rain was steady and unhurried on the Pearl District street below. 6 weeks minimum before they file, Brenda had told Dennis on the phone. She had given herself 6 weeks. She had given me 9 days. Helen filed on October 28th. I want to tell you about the morning of the filing because the morning matters. I waking at 5:47 a.m. in the Knott Street house, the house I had owned since 2007 Lun. The house I had renovated twice with my own crew, the house whose load-bearing walls I knew by name. Brenda was asleep beside me. I lay there for a few minutes, looking at the ceiling, listening to the Portland rain against the northeast-facing windows. Then I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with Paul Garrett's certified report and Helen's filing brief, which she had emailed to me the night before for final review. I read every page. I was at Helen's office on Southwest 12th Avenue by 8:30 a.m. She filed at 9:07 a.m. Lun. Brenda's attorney, the one from the September 28th consultation summary I had found in her desk drawer, received the filing notification at 9:22 a.m. Lun. He called Brenda at 9:31 a.m. I know this because I was at a job site on Northeast Fremont Street by that time, and Brenda called me at 9:44 a.m. Lun. And the quality of her voice told me everything I needed to know about the call she had just received. Mike. Her voice was controlled, but not entirely. I got a call from an attorney. Have you talked to anyone? I have an attorney, I told her. Her name is Helen Morse. Her office is on Southwest 12th. Chaco. A silence. When did you... She stopped. Started again. How long have you known? Since the 12th, I said. Andina. October 12th. Lontatsjot. Another silence. You were there, she said. 2 tables away, I told her. You texted me from 2 tables away. The silence this time was longer. Mike, Brenda, I said. Let's let the attorneys talk. I hung up. I stood on the Fremont Street job site with the Portland rain on the back of my jacket, and I looked at the renovation in progress in front of me. The kitchen we were rebuilding, the walls open to their studs, the new structure visible where the old one had been. And I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not anger. Something quieter than both. Something that felt, surprisingly, like relief. Here is the complication I had not planned for. The filing from Helen and the filing from Robert, Sandra Hale's attorney, had been coordinated in timing but not in content. Robert had filed Sandra's divorce petition on October 27th, one day before Helen filed mine. Dennis Hale's attorney had therefore received 2 simultaneous actions. His client's wife filing for divorce and documentation of the shared account that named both Dennis and Brenda as co-owners. Dennis's attorney called Robert. Robert called Helen. Helen called me on October 29th at 11:15 a.m. Dennis's attorney is requesting a joint conference, she said. He wants to discuss the shared account documentation before proceeding. His position is that some of the transfers were made without his client's full knowledge of their legal implications. I thought about that. He's trying to distance Dennis from the financial misconduct, I said. That's my read, Helen said. Which puts him in an interesting position, because distancing Dennis from the shared account means acknowledging that Brenda was the primary architect of it, which helps us, I said. Substantially, Helen said. Are you comfortable with a joint conference? With you in the room, I said. Absolutely, she said. Then yes, I told her. Schedule it. The joint conference was November 4th, a Monday, at Robert's office on Southwest Broadway. 4 attorneys and 2 clients, Sandra and me, sitting at opposite ends of a conference table, having never met, connected by the specific gravity of having been wronged by the same pair of people at the same time, in what turned out to be a carefully coordinated operation that neither of us had seen coming. Sandra was 51. She had the look of someone who had been crying recently and had stopped and did not intend to start again in this room. She nodded at me when I came in. I nodded back. We did not speak directly during the conference. That was the attorney's domain. In the financial structuring, that the account had been opened at Brenda's suggestion and that Dennis had not fully understood the implications of co-signing. Helen listened to all of this with a yellow legal pad in front of her and a pen she did not use. Page 4, she said. Mr. Hale's signature appears on the account opening documentation, the initial deposit authorization, and 4 subsequent transfer authorizations. I walked out of the building onto Southwest Broadway into the November rain, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the street, feeling the rain on my face, and I thought about nothing in particular for the first time in 3 weeks. When Kevin finished, Helen opened her folder. She placed Paul Garrett's report on the table. Kevin looked at his legal pad. He did not write anything. Page 7. A text message chain recovered from Gary Whitman's documented evidence, in which Mr. Hale discusses the account structure with my client's wife in specific and knowing terms. She looked at Kevin. The passive participant theory is available to you as a legal strategy. It is not, however, supported by the documentation. The number on page 1 of Paul's report, $412,000, sat in the center of the conference table like a fact that had decided to be visible. Dennis's attorney requested a recess. During the recess, Sandra came and stood next to me by the window overlooking Southwest Broadway. We watched the Portland rain on the street below. We did not talk for a while. Did you know? She asked finally, not accusatory, genuinely asking. No, I said, not until October 12th. She nodded. I knew in August, she said. I just didn't know how much. We stood there for another minute. I'm sorry this happened to you, I said. You too, she said. The recess ended. Dennis's attorney proposed a settlement framework that acknowledged the shared account transfers and assigned Brenda primary responsibility for the financial structuring. Helen reviewed it. She made 2 modifications. Kevin accepted both. Helen looked at me across the conference table. I nodded once. We were done by 3:30 p.m. Lun. The divorce finalized in March. The terms included a full accounting of the $412,000, the majority of which was returned to the marital estate. Sullivan Building was valued independently, and because I had maintained meticulous financial separation between the business accounts and the joint accounts, a habit, not a strategy, the kind of thing you do when you've been running a business for 22 years and you know what clean books look like. Dennis and Sandra's divorce finalized in April. Gary Whitman sent me a bottle of good Pinot Noir from a Willamette Valley winery with a card that read, "For a client who turned out not to be a client. Best of luck." I opened it on a Sunday evening in May, sitting on the back porch of the Knott Street house watching the light go off the garden.
If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor: subscribe. A lot of people listen without ever doing it. It costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. Now, the last thing I want to tell you.
Here is what I want to say about that night at Andina. Not the part where I saw Brenda, but the part where Gary sat down across from me and said, "Stay still. The real show is about to start." I have thought about that sentence for 8 months. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't, the way he said it. It was quiet, practical. The instruction of a man who had seen what happens when people don't follow it. And I followed it. Not because I am patient by nature, though I am. Not because I am calculating, though I can be Lun. I followed it because 22 years of building things had taught me the single most important thing I know about construction, which is this. The quality of every outcome is determined entirely at the foundation stage. You cannot fix a bad foundation by working harder on the floors above it. You cannot compensate for a load-bearing wall that was installed wrong by adding beautiful trim. The foundation either is or it isn't, and the time to get it right is before anything else is built on top of it. Brenda had spent 4 months building a foundation. She had been methodical about it. More methodical, honestly, than I had given her credit for. Lun. The shared account, the transfers, the attorney consultation, the 6-week timeline. She had done real work. She had made real plans. What she had not accounted for was that I would find out before she was ready. And when I found out, when Gary sat down across from me and gave me the one thing Brenda's plan had not included, which was time, I did not waste it. I did not spend it confronting her. I did not spend it being angry, Lun. I spent it the way I spend every morning on a job site, identifying the structure, understanding what's load-bearing, and making sure the foundation I was building was going to hold whatever I put on top of it. The people who plan to leave you in the worst possible position are counting on one thing, that you won't see it coming, that your surprise will become their advantage. That the emotional shock of the discovery will short-circuit your judgment long enough for their plan to get a head start. The answer, and I want to be clear that this is not about cruelty, not about retribution, not about winning. The answer is simply to not let that happen. To take the time you are given, however much or little it is, and use it to be as prepared as the situation requires. Brenda had 6 weeks minimum, she told Dennis. I had 9 days. 9 days. Helen Morse, Paul Garrett, and 22 years of knowing what clean books look like. That was enough. There is something else I want to say, and it is about Sandra Hale. Standing at that window on Southwest Broadway during the recess, watching the Portland rain, Sandra said, "I knew in August. I just didn't know how much." I have thought about that sentence nearly as much as I've thought about Gary's. I knew. I just didn't know how much. There is a version of this story where both of us had been seeing something for months, some shift in temperature, some absence of the specific warmth that was supposed to be there, and had been explaining it to ourselves with whatever explanation was most available. Stress at work, a difficult season, the ordinary friction of long-term partnership. We were not wrong that something had changed. We were wrong about the explanation. The educational layer of this story, and I say this not as a lecture but as something I genuinely learned, is that documentation is not paranoia. It is not distrust. It is not the absence of love. It is the practice of a person who understands that the world occasionally requires you to know exactly where you stand. And the people who maintain clean records, who keep their accounts separate, who hold on to the paperwork not because they expect trouble, but because that is simply how organized people live, are the ones who can respond when trouble arrives. I had not maintained those records in anticipation of this. I had maintained them because it was how I ran a business. The business habits and the personal habits were the same habits, as they tend to be in people who have spent long enough doing things the right way. The foundation was already there. Brenda built hers in 4 months. I had been building mine for 22 years. Lunny. When her attorney received Helen's filing, he was looking at a structure that had been load tested for 2 decades. It held, "That is the closing thought I want to leave you with. Not the $412,000, not the joint conference on Southwest Broadway. Not even Gary Whitman's bottle of Willamette Valley Pinot, which was excellent, by the way. The closing thought is this: the foundation you build before you need it is the only foundation that works when you do. Build it anyway. Build it before you know what it's for.